As chair, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Last year, Democrats passed the American Rescue Plan, which delivered an historic $130 billion investment to help K-12 schools safely open and address students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs. An analysis of district-level ARP plans from Future Ed indicates that spending on social, emotional, learning, and student mental health are key priorities for districts across the country. This is the case in my district where ARP funds, about no less than 160 million, have been used to provide social emotional counseling to students and staff. So, Ms. Harper, let me ask, how can districts use the American Rescue Plan funding to create positive and welcoming school climates, particularly at this moment in time? And have you seen any promising examples in your research?
Thank you so much for that question. One thing that's important to know is that there's generally not a one-size-fits-all approach that will work for all schools. The approach we take has to be tailored to the specific needs of a school community, the specific needs of the students within that community. That said, districts should really take this opportunity to focus on updating infrastructure and addressing systemic challenges to reap long-term benefits. Right now, school systems should be investing in collecting data directly from students, from staff, from other community members to assess needs and identify where additional supports are needed. And that student mental health is absolutely a priority. But this is an area where we have long faced workforce shortages that have only caused even more challenge, as we headed into the pandemic. So how do we create pipelines that ensure that the mental health workforce is there to support all of our nation's schools?
Thank you. And the 2018 GAO study on discipline disparities found that corporal punishment disproportionately harms certain students, including students of color and students with disabilities, even though these students do not misbehave at higher rates than their white or non-disabled peers. So can you please elaborate further on these disparities and where they are most pronounced? Ms. Harper? Someone else?
I'm happy to answer that question. I know you referenced corporal punishment, so I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. And thank you for that question. We know that, like other forms of punitive discipline in school policing, corporal punishment is used disproportionately against Black students. As I mentioned in my testimony, in the 2017-18 school year, the rate of Black students being hit was twice as high as that of white students. In Mississippi, where about a quarter of instances of corporal punishment in the US take place, we know that Black children accounted for about 63% of the students corporally punished, even though they only made up 49% of the student population. And Black girls in particular received 73% of the punishments given to girls in that state. And so the root of your question is really important, Mr. Chairman. These students are not more likely to misbehave. We know that from lots of research, and we know that from common sense. There's nothing about Black students that makes them more likely to break rules. But what is true across all types of punishment is that Black students and other students of color, like Latinx and Indigenous students, are more likely than their peers to be punished, and punished harshly. And that really has to do with how adults are viewing these students and making assumptions about their behavior and their culpability. It has to do with systems, so the policies and practices that enable adults in schools to punish students in ineffective and harmful ways. And as you point out, we also know that students with disabilities experience higher rates of corporal punishment than their peers without disabilities. They accounted for 21% of corporal punishments that same year, even though they make up about 15% of the student population. And again, this shouldn't be happening to them. Students with disabilities may need specific supports and services and should have those, but when schools are not providing those services to students, they're instead relying on corporal punishment and other types of punitive discipline and policing.
Yeah, the quickest action is the first thought that comes to mind, but we've got to change that mindset. So I now would like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Owens, for his